You know, for some reason, I was always excited for Thunderbolts, a movie about a team of anti-heroes. I've never seen this before. Okay, but jokes aside, a team-up of some of the most forgotten, yet low-key underrated characters in the MCU, led by the absolute GOAT, Bucky Barnes. Yeah, sign me up. Yelena and David Harbour were also easily the bright spots of their mid-ass Black Widow movie. John Walker has become so beloved that there are video essays devoted to his character. And even Ghost is there too. I also love how they marketed Taskmaster, even though she dies in her first scene. Rip Stupido, I guess. Sorry, I keep getting sidetracked. So, Thunderbolts. Yeah, I was excited for it. Then I found out this movie had high scores, and I was like, alright. Then I watched it, and I was like, wait, that's it? I couldn't quite place what made me feel weird about this movie. Like, it's not like I hated the movie, it's definitely a solid MCU movie. Better than most in the post-Endgame era, but that's not saying a whole lot.
Look at those, they are wonderful. Oh, look at that.
But anyway, something felt off. This most recent rewatch, however, I finally figured it out. This movie has such an awkward plot structure. It doesn't feel like your typical team-up movie like the other Avengers movies. All of these other superhero team-up movies follow your conventional 3-act structure. It's your typical narrative framework where Act 1 consists of setup and having an inciting incident and introductions, Act 2 escalates the story, and Act 3 builds to a climax and overall resolution. But Thunderbolts doesn't feel like that. It's trying to do something different. Understanding this unconventional plot structure actually made me watch this movie in a new way. Like, when I watch one of these movies, I can usually pinpoint the set piece or a specific event per each of these 3 acts. Civil War, for example, has Act 1 have the UN bombing and Sokovia Accords drama, Act 2 has the whole airport scene, and Act 3 has the fight in Siberia. But looking at Thunderbolts, I can think of Act 1 being the whole vault scene, and Act 3 the void dream sequences. But what happens in the middle? Why does the ending feel slightly abrupt on my first watch, but more normal on future appearances? This movie feels awfully different. I'm not saying it's bad, but I can totally see this being weird and unappealing. It feels very scattered and slow sometimes, and today we're going to find out why and how it actually works. In this video, I want to take a look at Thunderbolts' plot structure and how it doesn't seem to follow a conventional 3-act structure and energy of a classic superhero team-up movie. I want to show how it does something unique that once you understand it, makes the movie infinitely better to watch. So before we go into Thunderbolts, I want to go over how these other Avengers films write their plot structures. Yes, this is technically an Avengers film, Disney changing the marketing won't fool me. But I guess it fooled many as this movie did kinda shit at the box office. Anyways, I'm gonna quickly go over the 4 Avengers movies. I know I already talked about Civil War, but there are more concrete superhero team-up movies, since that's mainly a Captain America movie. Guardians falls into this too, but I'm not gonna overstuff this video. So, they follow a 3-act structure. As I said before, Act 1 consists of setup. It usually introduces all our heroes and brings them together for the conflict through some inciting incident. Act 2 escalates the movie through challenges and gets our heroes to interact, before Act 3 has them team up and fight in some large-scale superhero team-up battle against a faceless CGI army. Okay, not always, but you get my point. There's usually a big fight and climax. What's also interesting is that each Avengers movie also starts with an initial action prologue. This isn't an inciting incident, but rather a hook that'll get us into the movie. Avengers 1, yes, I'm going to refer to it like that, follows the structure to a T, like crazy to a T. We got an initial action prologue with Loki's arrival and Nick Fury being like, who we gonna call? Then Act 1 is the team coming together on the helicarrier and the Germany thing. Act 2 is the helicarrier ambush ending with the death of Coulson. And Act 3 is the big final battle of New York with the climax of the nuke being sent to New York. Simple enough. Alright, let's lightning round the next 3 Avengers movies. Age of Ultron, Prologue, Hydra Base, Act 1, Creation of Ultron and the Party Sequence, Act 2, Wakanda Fight, Hawkeye House and the Soul Fight, Act 3, Big CGI Battle, Infinity War, Prologue, Asgard being attacked by Thanos, Act 1, Battle in New York and initial search for the stones, Act 2, Intro to Wakanda and Thanos getting the Soul Stone, Act 3, Battle in Wakanda and wherever the hell Iron Man is, and Endgame. Prologue, Bye Bye Thanos, Act 1, 5 years later and everyone's sad, Act 2, Time Heist, Act 3, another big CGI battle, and I think y'all get the point. So, let's see what Thunderbolts does. Prologue, Yelena's depressed. Okay, a little weird, a little slow. Are we sure this is a superhero team-up movie? Act 1, bunker scene. How long does this last though? Act 2, and Act 3, Sentry comes in, roughs them up, and Void comes in. Okay, what the hell is going on here? What is this story? Well, let's take a look at each section in depth. So, unlike these other superhero team-up movies, this prologue isn't a dramatized fight or a set of moments. It starts off slow and low-key mundane. There's a quick action scene, sure, but it's mostly over a narration about Yelena's sadness. It feels weird, but it does tell you the direction this movie is gonna go. It's more just a collection of talking scenes before we go into the first act. Yet it low-key works. What's interesting is that for a team-up movie, it really only focuses on Yelena. Sure, Bucky shows up too for a bit, but it's super disconnected, and there is no Ghost, no Walker, no Bob, no Taskmaster. That's right, no Taskmaster. What are we gonna do? Okay, but jokes aside, it focuses on Yelena specifically, because until the first act, the movie doesn't start as a team-up. It initially wants to showcase Yelena's psyche. It wants to show that she's alone and there's no one else that's really around. It's kinda clever, actually. Even the lead up to the vault isn't dramatized, which really clues you into this slow, methodical deconstruction of characters style movie. Which leads us to Act 1. It takes place in this bunker vault place, but it feels like a long time. So much so that I initially had trouble identifying when does this act come to an end and Act 2 begins. Is it when they escape the room after the bozos meet each other? No, that's probably the inciting incident. So it must be when they escape the compound altogether. But that's almost the halfway point of the movie. That feels weird. You're telling me this is a big superhero blockbuster where half the movie takes place in one location, a mundane vault? And yes, that's exactly what I'm telling you. The reason I feel like this movie is difficult for most audiences to love and get into is because it's not what you expect to get into. It's a superhero team-up movie. It's supposed to be fun, not this slow story taking place in a mundane location. But that's exactly it. Even the prologue emphasizes this with the monologue from a depressed person. The movie and plot structure is trying to echo the psyche of someone depressed and dealing with mental issues, but more on that later. I mean, look, even the conflict begins out of nowhere and Bob just randomly appears. There doesn't feel like there's any setup or organization for the characters to meet. Like I said before, the movie doesn't even show us Ghost, Walker, Bob, or Taskmaster before the fight scene. They show Bucky and Red Guardian, but it mostly focuses on Yelena. Bucky isn't even with them. He's completely disconnected to the point that the movie wants you to think this isn't even gonna be a team-up movie before it grows into one. Almost like the actual team of the Thunderbolts. This whole first act feels so low energy. No heroic music or anything. There's a lot of talking about votes and setups. Like, I thought I was supposed to be watching a superhero team-up. There is one cool action scene, and then the rest is teamwork and character exploration. What's that? The four in the vault start working together, and it shows how they really don't have any trust and continuously just keep selling. There is a funny reference though.
On your left. On your left. On your left.
Oh, that works. I hope.
Thought we wouldn't notice, but we did.
What's interesting is that a small fight scene into multiple small talking character exploring scenes is exactly what this movie clued us into in the prologue and setup. But going back to the plot structure, it feels weird, like it keeps going, and it finally feels like the act comes to an end when the four escape the compound and are located by Alexei. Bob flies away, crashes down, and this explosion marks the final end of Act 1. Before we talk Act 2, or lack thereof, I'm going to be silly quirky like the movie and talk about Act 3 first. So, when does Act 3 begin? Like with Act 1, where I struggled with where this ends, I had the same thing happen with Act 3, except with how it starts. And I like to say that it starts when the team finally comes together and is on their way to deal with Valentina and Bob. Like the scene of them discussing their guns and attire screams setup before a fight. And then of course, our heroes jump out of the van and start fighting our classic third act CGI army of faceless goons until this.
Jesus, you guys, I literally just put that drywall in.
I love this so much. Hero music starts playing and everything, and then the whole thing is just flipped on its head. We now have our heroes come face to face with Bob again, and yet another cool action scene in this one shot of Sentry absolutely cooking them. They quickly lose and things just end. We don't know where things will go, and this definitely doesn't feel like a climax. We then have our stereotypical forced breakup scene before our heroes come together again. The movie does get points for this good dialogue exchange though for Yelena and the great soccer goalie analogy.
Okay, that was really good.
And now we have our climax of our heroes against the Void. Just to note, climax doesn't mean third act. Climaxes tend to occur in the third act. The thing is, these big superhero team-up action movies have the climax really merged into the big CGI final battle. Think Avengers with the nuke moment, for example. Even though the third act is the whole Battle of New York, well, in the Thunderbolts' case, even though we had an action scene with the Sentry right before this, the movie is still going to follow the same structure we've established with the prologue and Act 1. Small action scenes into longer talking scenes. Except in this case, since it's Act 3 and our heroes have grown to come together, this non-action climax has them working together. It's a unique climax that fits the movie where the heroes come together and eternally fight and deal with their problems in the Shadow Realm. The villain isn't your big powerful guy like Loki, Ultron, or Thanos, which is an evil presence throughout the movie, but rather the darkness inside you, which works for this movie and especially this set of characters, but it doesn't answer the question of the different plot structure. Circling back to where this act starts, it's when the heroes finally team up to stop Sentry. That would mean this third act kind of feels divided in two, the Sentry fight and loss and the Void fight and win. If that's the case, where is Act 2? We've just discussed Act 1 and Act 3. Act 1 has all the bunker stuff and the team meeting, and Act 3 has all the Sentry Void stuff and the team finally working together. But what happens in between them? The middle of the movie feels like nothing memorable happens except that Bucky joins the team. Like, you got that badass action scene, I guess, but it lasts 2 minutes and the trailer spoiled it anyways. It rather feels like a collection of small conflicts and scenes of characters coming together. Let me explain. I mean, after this whole kamikaze situation, you have the introduction of the Sentry Project. Like, this is textbook Act 2 setup. Except, after this, they get picked up by Alexei, which I actually think is a pretty good scene. Bucky comes in that rushed car chase, like I mentioned, Sentry and Val yap, and then the team talks to Bucky, and then Act 3 begins? That's like 10-15 minutes of time. This is over a 2-hour movie. Act 2 is doing the right things, I guess. It's the confrontation stage. It escalates the conflict and pushes the protagonist to act, which they all do. But it rather feels like a collection of scenes that transition between the two long acts, Act 1 and 3. There doesn't feel like there's much downtime to separate the acts and spend time in Act 2, which makes Act 2 feel like it doesn't have an identity. Nothing happens here, and it feels like a transition, which made me realize this awkward plot structure. This movie doesn't follow the usual superhero team-up acts of 1, 2, 3, but rather it's 2 large acts, split in 2, with a small transitionary part with no real identity. It doesn't feel like the full team gets to really work together until the climax and the last act. See, the first half is how disconnected the team is, while the second half is the team working together. Hell, the team doesn't meet Bucky, someone who's supposedly their leader, until past the halfway point. But that's exactly it. Thunderbolts doesn't have your typical Act 1, 2, and 3 like the Avengers movies, but rather it's 2 long acts, split in 2 with a few minutes of transition scenes in between. Each act follows the same general formula set up from the beginning, even the mini transitionary act. If you want to call it Act 2, we can call it Act 2. And what essentially that is the mini action scene into a bunch of yapping. Act 1A, for example, has Yelena's intro, which ends with the action scene in the vault, and you know, this. Bye bye! Meanwhile, Act 1B is the rest of the bunker escape, but with no real action, just characters working together. Notice how it never really shows a big action scene of them fighting the guards. Mini Act 2 has the Bucky action scene into the yapping. Act 3A has the team up and cool action scene with Sentry, and then Act 3B is once again no real action, but characters working together to internally stop the Void through the power of friendship. The story does follow a plot structure, just not the one you expect. It's different, weird, like the Thunderbolts themselves. Notice that the plot structure of the story being split in 2, with the large set pieces of the bunker and then New York, is a representation of who these heroes are. They're also individuals split in 2 and broken. Dealing with mental health, oftentimes it feels like who they are is split in 2 as well. None of them follow the typical structure of a hero either. It's funny, the only character to follow the typical hero's journey and 3-act structure of a story is ironically the only new character who is brought up to be this new hero, Bob. Think about it. He is introduced and has to learn who he is in Act 1, learns his powers in Act 2, and then has to fight his internal self in Act 3. But the rest of the movie and other characters feel very scattered. Just a bunch of heroes that have to overcome their demons, mental health, and grow to not just be a team, but satisfied individuals. Other Avengers movies don't have to do this because their heroes aren't dealing with things like depression and loneliness. Like the characters, there are different things that are brought up and forgotten, or maybe more like moved past. Things like the impeachment thing and votes is completely forgotten about after Act 1. Ghost doesn't get really much to do, and Bucky doesn't even have an arc. And yes, these things definitely may not work, and I always try to understand why, but that's the thing, it's not trying to be the typical superhero movie you expect. It's not perfect, it's just a super different structure that works for the unique story that is being told. The third act has a climax, like every other superhero team-up movie, but the plot structure and style make it a unique one. It's not a CGI battle, but rather deep introspection of the themes presented in the Shadow Realm. What's even more interesting is that in the void scene, the last place they visit is the place Yelena started in. The movie comes low-key full circle, but in a very unconventional way. That's the thing, this whole movie is different than any superhero team-up movie for a reason. It's a reflection of the themes, tone, and characters in the movie. That's why it feels so disconnected and low energy, especially at the start. Notice that the movie gets more heroic, emotional, and energetic as the movie goes on, because that's when the heroes actually gain their sense of purpose. They even become the new Avengers in the most unconventional way possible, a way that garners a lot of hate clearly. The end credits scene shows you this, it's just a bunch of hate commentary. Most people don't understand them, and thus the whole movie is unconventional because the characters are unconventional. Each of them struggle with mental illness and various sets of problems that makes them disconnected from the rest of the world. Something that the plot structure shows too. It doesn't contain the typical 3-act structure of other superhero team-up movies because these aren't your typical heroes. It's not your typical superhero team-up. It's not supposed to just be an action movie, but a character study. The climax shows this, and most importantly, the plot structure shows this. It doesn't matter that certain plot points go away or evolve. What matters is that the plot structure is different because the heroes are different. The moment you understand that, this movie becomes way better and way more rewatchable. The movie wanted you to fall in love with these obscure characters in a different way than your normal MCU heroes, and I'd say the movie does just that. Thank you so much for watching. What do y'all think of the Thunderbolts? Does it feel like an unconventional superhero movie, and do y'all like it? Did y'all notice this weird 3-act structure? Please like, comment, and subscribe. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. Additionally, please follow my Instagram at filmski07 for more content like this, as well as additional reviews, rankings, and rewrites. On top of that, please subscribe to my YouTube, as it will notify you of any new YouTube videos as I have been rebranding and growing my channel. Thanks again, have a good day.